The verdict today in the Edmond drug ring trial in Washington. 24-year-old Rayful Edmond convicted of running a $2 million a week cocaine crime outfit in the nation's capital. The one-time schoolyard basketball star faces a mandatory life sentence now. 10 co-defendants, including friends and relatives, were found guilty on related charges. Security surrounding the trial was unusually tight. Names of the jurors were kept secret even from the judge and lawyers to guard against possible reprisals.
And we began tonight with that Fox 5 News alert. One of D.C.'s most infamous drug kingpins, Rayful Edmond, is dead just months after being released from federal prison. Edmond was sentenced to life in prison in 1990 for running a multi-million-dollar cocaine ring in D.C. that led to so much violence and so many killings. It led to the district being called murder capital of the U.S. Edmond was released from prison and transferred to a halfway house at the end of July after cooperating with the FBI. His cause of death has not yet been released. He was 60 years old.
The 1980s weren't just marked by politics and progress. They were marked by fear. At the center of this storm was one man. His name, Rayful Edmond. To some, he was a villain. To others, a savior. But to everyone, he was untouchable. Tonight, we'll uncover the rise, the fall, and the lingering mysteries of one of America's most notorious drug lords. What made Rayful Edmond so powerful? And why, even after his death, does his shadow loom so large over Washington?
For safety, we're not showing the face of the man that members of Rayful Edmond's cocaine empire knew as Jimmy.
I was in there for like 3 days and got asked, did I want to do undercover work?
He was 26 when he began living undercover as a cocaine dealer. Unarmed and using only his wits, he worked his way close to the top of the cocaine wholesale operation that is estimated to have netted Rayful Edmond Jr. $1 million a day in the mid to late 1980s. 30 murders were tied to the operation. You knew it was an organization that enforced discipline with murder.
Yes.
He remembers shipments of cocaine delivered by the truckload.
And a guy sitting on the back with a Uzi, with 2 Uzis.
Rayful Edmond III was born in 1964 into a house filled not with luxury, but with struggle. Packed into a small home with 20 to 30 relatives, Rayful grew up watching his parents scrape by. Government workers by day, illegal dealers by night. The streets of D.C. whispered promise of wealth, fast cars, and respect, and Rayful listened closely. By the time he was in his 20s, Rayful wasn't just listening, he was leading. His drug empire rose like a tidal wave, drowning entire neighborhoods in crack cocaine. Prosecutors would later claim that Edmond controlled 1/3 of all the cocaine in D.C., moving 400 pounds a week and raking in $2 million. His power wasn't just in the drugs, it was in the fear he inspired and the loyalty he commanded. A 150-member drug ring answered to him, including minors recruited straight from the streets. Yet to some, he wasn't a criminal, he was a benefactor. He handed out $100 bills to kids, threw lavish parties, and was seen with basketball stars from Georgetown Hoyas. Even John Thompson, the Hoyas' legendary coach, stepped in, meeting with Rayful to urge him to stay away from his players. But was it a warning or recognition of Rayful's growing influence?
Then there's the legendary story about Georgetown basketball coach John Thompson's face-to-face confrontation with Edmond. The coach told the basketball-loving drug kingpin, who reportedly offered as much as $50,000 to some Hoyas players to be on his playground team, to leave them alone.
Rayful respected that because Rayful was a big basketball fan.
For every life Rayful touched with generosity, countless others were devastated. Families torn apart, communities gutted, the murders, the overdoses. They were the cost of doing business in his world. By the late 1980s, the empire began to crack. The government had had enough. In 1990, at just 25 years old, Rayful was sentenced to life without parole for running a criminal drug enterprise. But even in court, he remained defiant, denying his role as DC's kingpin. Murder charges didn't stick, but the damage was done. He was behind bars.
The 1989 bust of the Rayful Edmond drug organization resulted in charges against almost 24 people. The sandstorm of cocaine that covered the nation's capital in misery and bloodshed would slowly start to recede. Jimmy says his only regret is that many who worked so hard to bring D.C.'s drug kingpin to justice were never fully recognized for their work.
Group 32 from DEA MPD Task Force that always had my back on the street, that always watched me. And I'd do it again.
After he went to prison, he sold even more. Right here behind the concrete walls, steel bars, and locked doors of this maximum security federal penitentiary in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania.
But prison didn't stop Rayful. In fact, it only expanded his reach. While sitting in a Pennsylvania prison, Rayful Edmond brokered deals with Colombian cartels, moving more cocaine than he had ever on the streets. Even from a cell, his empire thrived, forcing the government to form a specialized task force to combat drug trafficking within prisons. Rayful wasn't just a prisoner, he was still a king.
Following his conviction as a drug kingpin, Edmond was sentenced to 2 life terms without the possibility of parole. But within just days of his arrival, he was back in business. He was dealing drugs right from his prison cell.
Just about everybody inside the jail in some way, shape, form, or fashion is dealing in drugs, either directly or indirectly.
He was caught and 2 years ago struck a deal with the feds. Ever since, he's been telling them exactly how he pulled it off. Tell me what drugs you dealt with in prison. Cocaine?
Cocaine.
Crack?
Crack.
Heroin?
Heroin.
What else?
Marijuana. Those were the basic 4: cocaine, crack, and heroin, and marijuana.
There's nothing left. You did the gamut.
Yeah, I did it all.
He did it all and then some. For starters, he brought drugs into the prison through this visiting room. He hired other inmates whose girlfriends, during contact visits, would pass the stuff packed in small balloons.
She might kiss him, and he put them in his mouth. He drank a little bit of soda or water, swallow them. He go do it again. Good
He's
day.
got them all inside.
Got them all inside. Then when he get back inside the institution, he spit them up.
What's the most you ever heard of those that any one person...
That I ever seen one person bring? I seen somebody bring in like 60 of them.
Edmond says prison officials know this goes on.
It keeps the jail mellow. Just keep people patient. You know, they be able to get high and chill. So they like this and let these things happen sometimes.
Come on.
Yeah, that's what they do.
He wasn't just selling drugs to other prisoners. He also masterminded the shipment of more than 2 tons of cocaine and crack from the coca fields of Colombia to the District of Columbia.
In some ways, he's like the Babe Ruth of crack dealers.
Eric Holder, the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, was, until recently, the top prosecutor in Washington, D.C. It was his office that locked Edmond up in the first place. Tell us the magnitude of his operation from inside the prison.
If you look at it on a monthly basis, he was exceeding that which he did when he was running what, to that time, had been the largest drug operation in Washington, D.C. history.
He was doing more from in prison? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, at its maximum, he was doing about 400 kilograms of cocaine per month while in prison, and while on the street, he was doing about 300 at its maximum.
Edmond says it was easy to do from behind bars.
I think it's much easier than when you're on the street.
Easier than on the street?
Much easier because you're right there with the people that have direct access to the narcotics that you need. Colombians, Cubans, Mexicans.
All thrown in together.
All thrown in together.
And then came the unexpected. The king turned informant. Rayful began working with prosecutors, testifying in court, participating in sting operations, and giving up names, lots of names. Over 100 arrests came from his cooperation. But was this redemption or just another calculated move?
Rayful Edmond was the big drug kingpin in D.C.
Yeah, Ray for the rat, Ray for the rat.
Ray for the rat. Ray for the rat.
Right, because then by 1989, he gets arrested.
That's, yep.
At the time, he was supplying 60% of the cocaine in D.C. and making $70 million a month.
That's the rumor.
And he ends up getting arrested, convicted. He gets life in prison, and his mother gets 14 years in prison.
Mm-hmm.
He continues to sell drugs in prison.
Yep.
Gets another 30 years. And then by 1996, he becomes an informant.
Yep. You know why he came informant?
Because of his mother?
Nah, bullshit.
That was the story, that he became an informant, let his mother out.
Man, bull. His mother was running numbers way before he was hustling. Fuck out of here.
Okay.
Come up from the streets. Man, they took some shit. My homies took some from him. He was fucking with the, what's that lady named? Blanco? Cowgirl?
Griselda Blanco? Yeah.
The two sons was in it in Lewisburg. Her two sons was in Lewisburg.
Mm-hmm.
And he started fucking with them. And he plugged one of our homies up with them. And I'm glad he didn't plug him. I know my little man used to be on this case. Lord Nut. So I'm glad I was fucking with Nut, not him. You know what I'm saying? So he plugged one of our homies up. Our homies took his shit, gave him a little bit of money, was like, that's all we got. We took a loss. So they gave him some more shit. They took that. Then he started telling. So he told on all them niggas. He told on all them.
Rayful's cooperation put him in danger. The government relocated him to a new prison under a new identity. Witness protection became his new life, but his choices left his former allies furious. Was he seeking redemption, or was this just self-preservation? In the 1997 interview, Rayful himself reflected on his actions. He says, quote unquote, "A lot of my friends from my neighborhood lost their lives because I brought drugs into the community. I feel bad about them. Back then, I was just thinking about the power."
So the feds have put him in a little-known witness protection program for convicts. He lives under an alias in a different prison where it's hoped those he betrayed won't find him. But if he's hiding out, why is he talking to us? He says he wants the kids in Washington, D.C., who see him as a hero, to know that what he did was wrong.
A lot of my friends from my neighborhood lost their lives because I brought drugs in the community. You know, the people dying.
Crack babies?
Some babies probably was born from crack because of me. Yeah, I feel bad about it now, but back then, you know, I was just thinking about the power.
It's a striking statement, but was it genuine? Some believe Rayful had truly changed. Even John Dominguez, the prosecutor who had once put him away, became one of his defenders, advocating for a reduced sentence in 2019. Dominguez said, quote unquote, "He made a decision to show everyone that he had changed," and the court seemed to agree. In 2021, Rayful's life sentence was reduced to 20 years. The government pointed to his quote-unquote unparalleled cooperation. December 17, 2024, Rayful Edmond died at 60 years old, living in a halfway house in Miami, far from the streets that once made him infamous. His death was confirmed by the Federal Bureau of Prisons. The cause? Unknown. Even in death, questions remain.
It's been about 24 hours now since we learned a significant figure in modern D.C. history died.
Yeah, but he wasn't a politician, and he wasn't a sports star. Rayful Edmond was a notorious drug kingpin.
He thrived during the crack cocaine epidemic of the 1980s, which spiked the city's murder rate so high, D.C. became known as the murder capital of the nation. Edmond spent 35 years in prison. He was released 4 months ago to a halfway house in Miami. At the time of his release, News 4's Paul Wagner brought us this report on Edmond's impact on D.C.
The release from prison came as a bit of a surprise. Edmond is now out in part because in the 90s, he cooperated with the government after the FBI learned he was making large drug deals with the Colombian cartel from his federal prison cell in Pennsylvania. In 1994, he flipped and became a snitch. Court records show for the next 20 years, Edmond provided information to the feds that led to the convictions of at least 100 people. Here in D.C. during the late 80s, he ran his cocaine operation from a house in Northeast where a young police recruit successfully infiltrated the gang. In 2019, News 4's Jackie Benson spoke with the undercover officer, now retired.
I was in there for like 3 days and got asked, did I want to do undercover work?
The undercover was known to the gang as Jimmy, who remembers cocaine shipments being delivered by the truckload.
And a guy sitting on the back with a Uzi, with 2 Uzis.
At one point, Edmond became close with some of Georgetown University's top basketball players and coach John Thompson met with Edmond and asked him to leave his players alone.
Rayful respected that because Rayful was a big basketball fan.
The crack epidemic had the district in a vice grip for years, with countless murders linked to it. In the district, Paul Wagner, News 4.
Now, the News 4 I-Team's Tracy Wilkins joins us in studio here now. Tracy, you grew up here in Washington, D.C. So for people who are more recent transplants to this area or even younger people, can you sort of break down the impact that Rayful Edmond had on our area even more?
Well, so according to prosecutors, he was operating some 60% of the crack cocaine that was moving throughout the District of Columbia. That is a large amount of drugs coming into this small city, right? And he had, at the time of his arrest, one of the most profitable drug operations in the nation, right? So what that looked like here was, I was raised in Prince George's County. My maternal grandmother lived in Northeast D.C., 42nd and Benning Road, just a couple of blocks up from Minnesota Avenue and near the shrimp boat. And I remember growing up and feeling just a feeling of safety in that community, being able to play and you know, do whatever there. And I also remember the change in 86, 87, 88, when the community just was different. Apartment complexes where working people lived became crack houses, you know, and the feeling of the community shifted. And I think that that happened throughout the district and a lot of places where Black people lived in D.C., that there was just this, it felt like living in a war zone, and all of the murders and all of the shooting and all of the things that were happening. And so it was a very difficult time. And I think that if you talk to these folks who have survived, because Edmond didn't do this alone. He had a network of dealers who he operated with, and there were a lot of people who were making money off of that operation. They lost, in addition to, for those who survived, a lot of time, right? Because of the war on drugs and these extended years that people spent in prison, and how that's impacted this generation, in addition to the addiction, the people who died, the people who were incarcerated. So many kids and grandkids have been left without loved ones. So that is the legacy, right? And Edmond apologized for the decisions he made when he was, you know, in his early 20s. He went to prison like 22. 23.
Yeah, well, you talk about his age. I want to bring up, in this morning's news meeting, you were talking about America's fascination with sort of, you know, gangsters, and the impact that he had on the area, as you mentioned. I mean, he died at the age of about 60, and the impact that he had in such a short amount of time in his youth in the city.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that we glorify crime and the underworld, but we tend to do that, right? That's just an American thing, right? But in this instance, we are living in the after effects of how all of these decisions that these young men made have impacted the city. A lot of them who are now trying to atone for what they did then, and you know, and if they had a second chance, would have made a different decision. There was an insane amount of money to be made, and a lot of people who wanted a part in that, and we are still dealing with the repercussions. So for people who weren't here to see D.C. before Edmond, D.C. after Edmond, it's two different cities in a lot of ways. And there was always hard drugs. We always had heroin. There was always a market. This was just much more controlled and much more organized than we'd seen before.
You know, its reach, being named the drug capital of the U.S. I mean, I didn't grow up here, but we heard about it in Indiana, and it was like, I don't know if we want to go to Washington, D.C. It's a scary place. So, I mean, when you think about even that.
The reach
you
it
know,
had.
Yeah, the reach.
Yeah,
so.
but folks are working to turn that around. And again, including a lot of the folks who worked with him are also trying to make that better and heal these communities that have been devastated.
Tracy, thank you for your insight.
Thank you.
Yesterday, it was just announced that Rayful Edmonds died
at
age 60. He had just gotten out for a couple of months.
I seen it.
According to Terrence Gangster Williams, he snitched on 300 people. They actually changed some of the rules in the feds because of him.
And they still took 30 years to get out.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember he was telling when he got caught selling drugs in jail still, and they tried to put his mom was in jail too, I think.
Yeah, they said, I remember watching the documentary about that. They were gonna lock his mom up and give him much more time. Yeah. And he just said, give me a bucket of chicken and I'll tell you guys everything you want. So they gave him a bucket of chicken, and he just sat there, ate piece after piece, and just started naming name after name after name after name.
I don't respect that though, man. I just don't respect that. Like, cause I mean, everybody got mothers and everybody got I don't know. But that's probably why God said, all right, I'm gonna let you go home for like 2 days. You only been out for like a month, few months. You know what I mean, because like, if you got caught, especially you the boss of the Kingpin.
Yeah, I personally think it was a drug overdose. I think he probably wanted to do a little bit of coke, whatever else, probably some fentanyl in there. Boom, dead. Especially at 60.
You see, I remember I seen a trial making what was going on. They had the bulletproof around the judge and getting bring on the helicopters and all that shit. I mean, I never thought he would be out of jail ever. But the FBI, they let out whoever they want to let out.
Yeah, but you did 30 years and you told on hundreds of people.
But remember, he was making like $1 million a day. They said something like that.
Well, he introduced crack to DC.
Yeah, so like
and they're saying that he was responsible for like 19 murders and like all this other type of shit. Like
he was young, so he wasn't like 20 something when that shit.
Rayful's story is one of the contradictions. A man who destroyed lives and yet saved others by taking down a network of traffickers. A man who craved power but later claimed to seek redemption. A man whose name was whispered in fear, celebrated in rap lyrics, and studied in criminal justice classrooms. Rayful Edmond III was more than a drug dealer. He was a symbol of a city's darkest days, a cautionary tale of ambition, and perhaps a ghost that will never truly rest. His story isn't just about what he did, it's about the questions he left behind. Did he ever find peace? Or is his legacy one that will haunt Washington forever? All right, y'all, there y'all have it, man. That's been the story of Rayful Edmond, straight out of the DC, the nation's capital. Hey, man, get in the comment section. Let me know what y'all think, man. Drillers and trappers, we out here trapping and drilling 247, and you already know what it is. Don't go nowhere. Watch that next video. Gang!